The smell of bitter almonds wafting from the cup of hot chocolate instantly chilled my blood. Clara had served it to me with that sweet smile she'd perfected over years. But something in her eyes shone with a coldness I had never seen before. Without her noticing, while pretending to look for sugar in the pantry, I switched my mug with that of Mark, her husband, who had gone to the restroom and left his hot chocolate untouched on the table. Minutes later, the gut-wrenching screams coming from the kitchen confirmed what my maternal instinct had suspected. My own daughter had tried to murder me. Mark was convulsing on the kitchen floor, foam coming from his mouth, and his eyes completely dilated. Clara was screaming with a desperation that seemed genuine, kneeling next to her husband of years, while I dialed 911 with hands that trembled as much from shock as from adrenaline. At years old, after having single-handedly raised an adopted child who had come into my life traumatized and broken, I never thought I would be witnessing that same child trying to kill me. "He's dying," Clara yelled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up cheeks. "Mark, please don't die. Mom, do something." But as I watched her perform her grief, something in my analytical mind, the same mind that had made me a successful accountant for years, began to process details that didn't fit. Why had Clara insisted so strongly that I drink the hot chocolate right away? Why had she prepared exactly 3 mugs when she knew Mark never drank hot chocolate in the afternoon? And why, despite her hysterical screams, was there not a single real tear in her eyes? The paramedics arrived in minutes that felt like hours. While they worked frantically to stabilize Mark, one of them asked me what he had eaten or drunk in the past few hours. "Hot chocolate," I replied automatically, but then corrected myself. "Well, he drank hot chocolate. I didn't get to finish mine." "Who prepared the hot chocolate?" I looked at Clara, who was sobbing theatrically while the paramedics prepared Mark for transport. "My daughter." The paramedic wrote something in his notebook and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "We're going to take him to the general hospital. Can you bring any remains of what he drank?" Clara immediately offered to collect the mugs, but I stopped her with a firmness that surprised me. "I'll handle it." In the kitchen, while Clara accompanied Mark to the ambulance, I examined the 3 mugs with completely new eyes. My mug, the one that had originally been for me, was completely empty. Mark's mug, the one I had barely touched, had traces of a thick liquid at the bottom. And the 3rd mug, the one that was supposedly originally for Mark, was untouched, with a strange, oily layer floating on the surface. I poured the remnants of the 3 mugs into separate jars and stashed them in my bag before following Clara to the hospital. As I drove behind the ambulance, my mind raced through years of memories that now seemed tinged with a new and horrible perspective. Clara had come into my life when I was years old and had lost all hope of being a mother. I had spent a decade trying to get pregnant with my late husband, Samuel, and after his death in a car accident, I had decided to adopt. The social workers had introduced me to Clara as a year-old girl who had suffered severe trauma. She had witnessed her parents' death in a fire and needed a patient, loving mother who could help her heal. I had been that mother. I had dedicated years of my life to loving, protecting, and healing a girl who arrived mute, scared, and seemingly broken. I had paid for years of psychological therapy. I had changed my career to have a more flexible schedule. I had turned down romantic relationships because Clara needed all my attention. And now, as I followed the ambulance carrying my daughter's poisoned husband, I realized that maybe I had been protecting a predator for 3 decades. At the hospital, while the doctors worked to save Mark's life, Clara clung to my arm with that emotional dependence she had shown since childhood. "Mom, what are we going to do if Mark dies? I can't live without him." But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the automatic impulse to comfort my daughter. Instead, I observed her with clinical eyes, searching for signs of the truth behind her performance. "Clara," I said calmly, "I need to ask you something very important." "What, Mom? What did you put in the hot chocolate?" Her expression changed so quickly that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. For a split second, I saw something cold and calculating cross her face before the mask of pain returned. "What do you mean?" "I only put in chocolate, milk, and sugar." "Clara, the hot chocolate smelled like bitter almonds." "Mom, you're in shock. Sometimes trauma makes us imagine things." But I was no longer the naive mother I had been for years. I was a year-old woman who had just realized she had raised a monster. As I waited for news of Mark in the emergency room, my mind automatically transported me back to that first night in August of year, when Clara arrived at my house in the suburbs of Phoenix. The social worker, Laura Benson, had prepared me to receive a severely traumatized child. "Hope," Laura had told me while we reviewed the adoption papers. "Clara is a special girl who needs a lot of patience. She witnessed her parents' death in a fire and hasn't spoken a single word since then." The girl who walked into my living room that night was small for her years, with nearly white blonde hair and huge blue eyes that seemed to have seen too much for her age. She wore a pink dress that was too big for her and carried a faded, dirty stuffed rabbit. "Hello, Clara," I had said, kneeling down to her level. "I'm Evelyn. From now on, this is going to be your home." Clara looked at me in silence for long minutes. Then she walked slowly toward me and placed her small hand on my cheek. It had been such a tender, touching moment that I started crying immediately. "Mommy," she had whispered in a small, broken voice, "are you my new mommy?" During the first few weeks, Clara had been the perfect child, polite, affectionate, grateful for every little kindness. She started talking more. She started smiling. She started calling me Mom with a naturalness that filled my heart. But she also began to display behaviors that worried me, though at the time I interpreted them as normal symptoms of trauma. I found my cat, Lily, dead in the backyard, a week after Clara arrived. The veterinarian said she had been poisoned, probably by eating something toxic someone had left in the yard. Clara cried inconsolably during the funeral we held for the cat. 2 weeks later, the fish in my aquarium were found floating dead. Clara suggested that maybe they had eaten something bad and insisted we buy new fish immediately so the house wouldn't feel so empty. A month later, my neighbor found her dog poisoned in her own yard. Clara had been playing with the dog that very afternoon, but I had been so in love with the idea of being a mother, so determined to heal this broken child, that I had rationalized every incident. Animals get accidentally poisoned all the time. Coincidences happen. Clara was just a traumatized child who needed stability and love. The first time I suspected something was really wrong was when Clara was years old. My sister Diane had come to visit us for Clara's birthday, bringing gifts and a lot of enthusiasm to meet her new niece. "She's beautiful," Diane whispered to me as we watched Clara play in the yard, "but there's something in her eyes that gives me the chills." "What do you mean?" "It's like she's evaluating me, like she's deciding whether she likes me or not. It's very calculating for a year-old." That night, Diane became violently ill after dinner, vomiting, diarrhea, high fever. We had to take her to the hospital where the doctor said it was probably food poisoning. "That's weird," Clara commented in an innocent voice. "We all ate the same thing, but only Aunt Diane got sick." Diane never came back to visit. When I asked her why, she would say she was too busy with work. But I knew there was something more. At age years, Clara had accidentally pushed a classmate down the school stairs. The girl had broken her leg and had to wear a cast for months. "It was an accident, Mom," Clara insisted with tears in her eyes. "I was just walking and she tripped." But the school principal told me privately that other students had seen Clara deliberately push the girl. At age years, she started stealing money from my purse, small amounts at first, then larger ones. When I confronted her, she denied everything with such absolute conviction that I began to doubt my own sanity. By age years, she had started manipulating her teachers into calling me to complain about her behavior. Then she would convince me that they were being unfair to her because they didn't understand her childhood trauma. At age years, she had married a year-old man who died in a car accident months later. Clara inherited all his money. At years, she married another older man who died of a heart attack years later. Another substantial inheritance. And now, at years old, Mark was fighting for his life after drinking hot chocolate that smelled like bitter almonds. A doctor approached us in the waiting room. "Family of Mark Miller." "I'm his wife," Clara said immediately. "How is he?" "He's stable but critical. We have detected dangerous levels of cyanide in his system." "Cyanide," Clara feigned shock. "How is that possible?" The doctor looked directly at me. "Ma'am, did you prepare the food or drink that the patient consumed today?" No, I replied clearly. My daughter prepared everything. For the first time in years, I was not protecting Clara from the consequences of her actions. Dr. Thompson, an older man with a serious expression, led us to a private room to talk about Mark's condition. Clara clung to my arm as she had done all her life when facing difficult situations. But this time, her touch caused me nausea instead of maternal tenderness. Mrs. Miller, the doctor told Clara, your husband has been poisoned with cyanide. It's a very specific substance that is not accidentally found in common foods or drinks. Cyanide, Clara sobbed with perfect acting. But how? Where could he have gotten cyanide? That is exactly the question we need to answer. Did your husband have access to industrial chemicals? Did he work in photography, metal cleaning, or some laboratory? No, nothing like that. Mark is an accountant. He works in a regular office. I don't understand how he could have been poisoned. The doctor turned to me. Ma'am, you were present when this happened. Did you notice anything unusual in Mr. Miller's behavior? Anything he ate or drank that could explain this? I looked at Clara, who was watching me with those blue eyes she had learned to use as weapons of manipulation. For the first time in years, I decided not to protect her. Dr. Mark drank hot chocolate that my daughter had prepared. The hot chocolate had a strange smell, like bitter almonds. Bitter almonds. The doctor quickly wrote something down. That is a classic indicator of cyanide poisoning. Clara looked at me with an expression of absolute betrayal. Mom, how can you suggest that I'm not suggesting anything, Clara. I'm just answering the doctor's questions honestly. But Mom, you were going to drink that hot chocolate too. Why would I do something that would hurt me too? It was a clever question, and for a moment, I doubted my own suspicions. But then I remembered how she had insisted that I drink mine immediately, while she had left hers cooling without tasting it. Ladies, the doctor intervened, I am going to have to report this case to the authorities. Cyanide poisoning always requires a police investigation. Police investigation. Clara visibly paled. Why? It must have been a terrible accident. Mrs. Miller, cyanide does not accidentally appear in homemade hot chocolate. Someone put it there deliberately. After the doctor left, Clara and I were alone in the waiting room. For the first time in my life, my daughter scared me. Mom, she said softly, her eyes cold. I hope you are not thinking of telling the police that I tried to poison Mark. Clara, did you poison Mark? Of course not. How can you even ask me that? Because the hot chocolate smelled like cyanide, and you were the one who prepared it. Mom, maybe the cyanide was in the ingredients. Maybe someone else put something in our kitchen. There are many explanations. Like what? Like someone wanting to hurt our family. Like someone breaking into the house and contaminating our food. Like Mark having enemies we didn't know about. It was the same technique she had used for years. When faced with evidence of wrongdoing, she created alternative theories so elaborate that they made me doubt what I had seen with my own eyes. Clara, Why did you insist so much that I drink my hot chocolate immediately? Because it was hot and tasted better that way. And why didn't you drink yours? Because it was too hot for me. I always let it cool down before drinking it. And why did you prepare 3 mugs when Mark never drinks hot chocolate in the afternoon? For the first time, Clara did not have an immediate answer. She remained silent for long seconds, and I could see her mind furiously working. I thought maybe this time he would want to try it. I was trying to be hospitable. At that moment, the police arrived. 2 detectives, an older woman named Detective Harris, and a younger man named Detective Reynolds. Mrs. Miller, Detective Harris asked. Yes, that's me, Clara replied immediately. We need to ask you some questions about what happened this afternoon. Of course, I'll do everything I can to help. Did you prepare the drink your husband consumed before collapsing? Yes, I made hot chocolate for my mother, for Mark, and for myself. Where did you get the ingredients? From the local supermarket. Regular chocolate powder, milk, sugar. When did you buy those ingredients? This morning. Did anyone else have access to those ingredients between the time you bought them and when you prepared the hot chocolate? No, they were in my kitchen the whole time. Did anyone else enter your house today? No, it was just Mom, Mark, and me. Detective Reynolds addressed me. Ma'am, did you drink the hot chocolate too? No, I smelled something strange and decided not to drink it. Can you describe that smell? It smelled like bitter almonds. The detectives exchanged meaningful looks. And what happened to your hot chocolate after you decided not to drink it? I looked at Clara, who was watching me with an intensity that frightened me. I accidentally switched it with Mark's. Accidentally? Yes, I lied, instinctively protecting my daughter despite my suspicions. Both mugs were on the table, and I got them confused. Clara smiled at me gratefully, but her eyes remained ice cold. That night, after the detectives finished their initial questions, and Mark was moved to intensive care, Clara insisted that I stay at her house. Mom, I'm too scared to be alone. What if whoever poisoned Mark comes back? It was the first time in years that Clara had invited me to stay at her house. Usually, our visits were brief and always in public places or at my home. I agreed, but not for the reasons she thought. The house Clara shared with Mark was impressive. 3 stories, a perfectly maintained lawn, expensive daycare paid for with the inheritances from her 2 previous husbands. Clara settled me into the 2nd floor guest room and went to rest in her master bedroom. I waited until I heard her deep, regular breathing. Then I began my own investigation. I started in the kitchen, examining every ingredient used for the hot chocolate. The chocolate powder seemed normal. The milk was fresh. The sugar was common sugar. But in the back of the pantry, behind a row of rarely used spices, I found a small, unlabeled jar filled with a white crystalline powder. I smelled it carefully. Bitter almonds, cyanide. I put the jar in my bag and continued searching. In the kitchen utensil drawer, hidden beneath cleaning rags, I found a small syringe of the type diabetics use for insulin. In Mark's study, I examined his financial documents. As an accountant, he kept meticulous records. What I found horrified me. For the last months, he had been withdrawing large amounts of money from his investment accounts, thousands of dollars every week, always in cash. On his personal computer, I found a document that chilled my blood. It was a letter addressed to his brother in Chicago, dated 1 week earlier. Dear Mark, if anything happens to me, I want you to know it wasn't an accident. Clara is slowly poisoning me. I've been feeling strange symptoms for months. Nausea, weakness, mental confusion. At first, I thought it was work stress, but I've started noticing that I always feel worse after the meals she prepares. I've been pretending to eat and then throwing the food away when she's not looking. I've also been taking money out of our accounts because I think she's planning something big. I'm afraid to confront her directly because she threatened to hurt her mother if I tried to leave her. Clara is not who she seems to be. I've found things in this house that would horrify you. If I die suddenly, please investigate. Don't let her get away with it again. Again, I went up to the 3rd floor, which Clara had converted into her personal study and where she kept her important documents. The door was locked, but I found the key hidden above the doorframe. What I discovered in that room completely changed my understanding of who my daughter really was. Boxes and boxes of meticulously organized documents, death certificates for her 2 previous husbands, life insurance documents where she was the sole beneficiary, correspondence with lawyers about inheritances, and most disturbing of all, detailed diaries documenting exactly how she had murdered both men. March TH. First dose of arsenic in Robert's morning coffee. Symptoms mild nausea attributed to stomach flu. March ND. Increased the dose. Robert vomited after breakfast, suggested he see a doctor, but told him it was probably just work stress. March TH. Robert is losing weight and energy. Doctors can't find anything specific. I'm giving him vitamins mixed with more arsenic. April TH. Robert died this morning. Death certificate says natural causes related to kidney failure. Inheritance dollar. The diaries continued with similar details about the death of her second husband, Frank, who had died of a heart attack 2 years after being poisoned with digitalis, a heart medication that in high doses causes cardiac arrest. But what horrified me most was a folder labeled Mom Hope Final Plan. Inside were copies of my will, where Clara was listed as my sole heir, documents from my bank accounts and investments, a life insurance policy for $1 million that I didn't remember signing, a detailed plan to gradually poison me over several months, and a note that said, "Accelerate plan. Mom is starting to suspect. Lethal dose of cyanide in hot chocolate. Blame Mark if necessary." My own daughter had been planning to murder me for months. But there was more. A box marked pre-adoption contained documents that completely shattered me. Clara had not lost her parents in an accidental fire. She had murdered them when she was years old, using matches to set the house on fire while they slept. The social workers had fabricated the trauma story to make it easier for her to find an adoptive family. For years, I had been raising and protecting a serial killer. I heard footsteps on the stairs. I quickly put the most important documents into my bag and ran to my room, arriving just in time to pretend I was sleeping when Clara opened the door. "Mom, are you okay?" I heard noises. "I just went to the bathroom, sweetie. Going back to sleep. Rest well, Mom. We'll go see Mark early tomorrow." After she left, I stayed awake the rest of the night, planning exactly how I was going to ensure Clara paid for all her crimes. The next day, while Clara was showering, I called Detective Clark from the backyard. "Detective, I need to see you urgently. I've found important evidence about Mark's poisoning." "What kind of evidence?" "The poison used to poison Mark. Documents proving my daughter has killed before, and evidence that she planned to kill me too." There was a long silence. "Mrs. Miller, are you sure about what you're telling me?" "Completely sure. Detective, my daughter is a serial killer." "Can you bring that evidence to the station?" "Yes, but I need to do it without her knowing." "Can you send a patrol car so it looks like a routine follow-up visit?" "Of course. We'll be there in minutes." When Clara came down for breakfast, I had already hidden all the important documents in my car. "Mom, how did you sleep?" "Well, considering the circumstances, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. I think we should hire a private investigator to look into who poisoned Mark." "Why a private investigator?" "The police are investigating." "Because the police can take months. I want to find the culprit now." "Do you have any theories about who might have done this?" I asked. "Well," she said, spreading jam on her toast with calculated movements, "Mark has been very stressed about work lately. Maybe someone from his office, or a dissatisfied client. Or maybe," she paused thoughtfully, "someone who knows about your money and wanted to hurt you by using Mark." "What do you mean?" "Everyone knows you're wealthy. Your house, your investments, your inheritance from Dad, Robert. Maybe someone thought that if something happened to you, Mark and I would inherit everything." The way she planted alternative explanations was brilliant, but they no longer worked on me. "Clara, do you know how much money I have?" "Not exactly, but I know it's considerable." "How do you know that?" "Because you were an accountant for years. Because Dad left you well provided for." "Have you ever seen my bank statements?" "Of course not. I'm not the type to spy on my mother's finances." But I had found copies of all my financial documents in her study the night before. The doorbell rang. Detective Clark arrived with 2 uniformed officers. "Good morning, ladies. We have some follow-up questions." "Is there anything new about Mark?" Clara asked. "Your husband is stable, but still critical. We have confirmed cyanide poisoning." She turned to me. "Could we speak privately?" "Outside in the yard. I handed her the bag with the evidence. Everything is in there. The cyanide, the diaries, the plans to kill me. Detective Clark's expression hardened. This is evidence of multiple homicides. I didn't know until last night, I said. We'll need you to come with us, and we are arresting your daughter immediately. Can I ask a favor? Yes. Please wait until I leave. I don't want my last memory of her to be handcuffs. Detective Clark nodded. I went back inside. Clara was washing dishes, softly whistling. Mom, I'm going home. I'd rather you stay, I'm sure. I hugged her one last time. I love you, Clara. I love you too, Mom. But we both knew it was a lie. Days later, the hospital called. Mark had woken up. Hope, he whispered. Thank you. I know you switched the mugs, he said. Clara told me. My blood froze. She had planned to poison you for months, he said. I knew. I stayed because she threatened to kill you. How do you tell a mother her daughter is a monster? He asked. And I had no answer. Mark, did you know she planned to kill me? I suspected. Lately, she had been asking questions about your will, about your finances, about whether you had any life insurance. Did she tell you why she wanted to kill me? Money. Clara thinks you're a millionaire. And am I? Mark looked at me with surprise. You don't know. I know I have some savings and investments, but I've never calculated the exact total. Hope, you have over $1 million in various accounts and investments. The figure took my breath away. How do you know that? Because Clara asked me to review your finances as a family favor. I thought it was to help you with financial planning. But now I realize she was calculating how much money she would inherit when you died. Mark, there's something you need to know. Clara has already been arrested. His expression changed to pure relief. Really? The police found evidence that she murdered her 2 previous husbands and evidence that she planned to kill me. She's in jail without bail. Mark started to cry. Hope, I've been living in terror for months. Every meal could have been my last. Every night I stayed awake, wondering if I would wake up in the morning. Why didn't you run away? Why did you stay in that house with her? Because I love you like the mother I never had. I couldn't leave her free to hurt you. His words moved me deeply. This man had risked his life to protect me from my own daughter. Mark, what exactly did you know about Clara's other husbands? I knew they had both died young and that she had inherited all their money. But it wasn't until I found her diaries that I realized she had murdered them. Did you read the full diaries? Yes, it's chilling, Hope. She wrote about every dose of poison as if she were writing cooking recipes, completely unemotional, totally calculated. Was there anything in the diaries about me? Mark nodded sadly. Pages and pages of plans to kill you. She had been studying your routine for months, finding the best way to poison you without it seeming suspicious. When was she going to do it? Originally, she had planned to do it gradually over several months, so it would look like natural death. But lately, she had decided to speed up the plan. Why? Because she thought you were starting to suspect her. She wrote that you had been asking questions about her finances and that you had mentioned wanting to know more about her previous husbands. I never asked those questions. I know. I think Clara was becoming paranoid. When serial killers have been active for a long time, they often start seeing threats where there are none. Mark, there's something else I need to ask you. What? Do you think Clara really loved me even a little? Mark looked at me with deep compassion. Hope, based on what I read in her diaries, I don't think Clara is capable of loving anyone. She saw you as a source of money and protection, but not as a mother. What did she write about me specifically? She wrote about you as if you were a long-term investment project. She calculated how much money you had spent on her over the years, how much your inheritance was worth, how long she would have to wait to inherit everything. Did she ever write anything affectionate about me? Mark looked down. No, Hope. I'm sorry. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started crying for real. Not tears of shock or fear, but tears of genuine grief for the daughter I thought I had, but who had never really existed. A week after Clara's arrest, Detective Clark summoned me to the police station for a meeting that would completely change my understanding of the situation. Mrs. Miller, she told me as I sat down in her office, we have been investigating your daughter's past based on the evidence you provided. What we have discovered is worse than any of us imagined. What have you found? Clara hasn't just killed her 2 husbands. We have identified at least 6 more victims over the past years. The room started spinning. 6 more. 3 college boyfriends who died in strange accidents. A boss who died of a heart attack after not giving her a promotion she wanted. An elderly neighbor who died of natural causes after complaining about her cats making too much noise. And a coworker who died in a car accident after reporting that Clara had been stealing money from the company. How is it possible that no one noticed the pattern? Because Clara is extremely intelligent. She spaced out the murders by years, used different methods each time, and always had solid alibis. Furthermore, she moved frequently, so there were never multiple deaths in the same police jurisdiction. Detective, is there anything about when she was a child? Detective Clark opened another file. That's where the situation gets truly disturbing. We've been investigating the fire that supposedly killed her biological parents. And it wasn't an accident. And Clara wasn't years old when it happened. What do you mean? Clara was years old when she murdered her biological parents. The social workers falsified her age to make her more adoptable and invented the trauma story to explain her psychopathic behavior. Did the social workers know she had killed her parents? At least one of them knew. Jane Miller, the woman who oversaw her adoption, left notes indicating she knew Clara had deliberately started the fire. Why did they allow me to adopt her if they knew she was dangerous? Because Jane Miller received a bribe of $1 to falsify the documents. A bribe from whom? From Clara's biological parents' inheritance. Even at years old, she was smart enough to bribe government officials. I remained silent for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I had just heard. Detective, does this mean that for years I have been raising a serial killer? Yes, you were a victim of an elaborate deception. You had no way of knowing the truth. But how did I not realize? How could I have been so blind? Mrs. Miller, psychopaths like Clara are masters of manipulation. They study their victims for years. You wanted to be a mother more than anything, and she exploited that desire. Are there more victims? We are investigating. Based on her behavior, we estimate she may have killed up to people. Clara started killing at age and never stopped. It's one of the most extreme cases of psychopathy we've seen. What's going to happen to her now? She will be tried for multiple counts of first-degree murder. She will likely receive life imprisonment without parole. Do you want to see her? Can I? Yes, but be careful. Even in jail, Clara is still extremely manipulative. Detective, I want to see her. The county jail was gray and smelled of disinfectant and hopelessness. When I entered the visiting room, Clara was already seated, wearing the orange uniform. She looked small and vulnerable, just like the little girl who arrived at my house years ago. Mom, she said softly, thank you for coming. I'm listening. I'm very sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt Mark, and I never wanted to hurt you. It was the same voice she had used for years. Clara, I said, the police told me you killed at least 8 people. Mom, that's not true. Some were accidents. Others were bad people who deserved it. Bad people like your husband's. Robert used to hit me, Mom. I never told you because I didn't want to worry you, but he hit me every night. What I did to him was self-defense. And Frank was stealing money from elderly clients at his job. He was a thief who ruined the lives of innocent people. And the neighbor who complained about your cats. How do you know about that? The police told me. Why did you kill him? Mom, he threatened to poison my cats. I couldn't allow that. Clara, did you kill your biological parents when you were years old? Her expression changed immediately. The mask of vulnerability slipped for a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Who told you that? The police investigated the fire. They know it wasn't an accident. Mom, they don't understand what really happened. Then you explain it to me. My biological parents were monsters. They did things to me. Terrible things a child should never experience. What kind of things? Things I can't repeat. Things that damaged me so much that I had to defend myself by killing them. It was the only way to escape. Clara, why did you lie about your age? I didn't lie. The social workers got confused with the documents. Clara, I know you bribed Jane Miller to falsify your file. Bribe? Mom, I was years old. How was I going to bribe someone with your parents' inheritance money? Mom, I think the police are lying to you to turn you against me. Clara, did you ever really love me? The question came out of my mouth before I could stop it. It was the question I had been avoiding, because I was afraid of the answer. Clara looked at me in silence for long seconds. I could see her mind working, calculating what answer to give me. Of course, I loved you, Mom. You are the only mother I've ever known. That's not a real answer. What do you mean? I asked if you loved me, not if you considered me your mother. Mom, why are you asking me that? Because I found your diaries. I read what you wrote about me. I know you saw me as a source of money, not as a mother. The mask slipped completely. The expression on Clara's face changed to something I had never seen before. Pure coldness and absolute contempt. Do you want to know the truth? She said in an icy voice. Yes. No, I never loved you, not for a second in years. Her words hit me like physical slaps. Why? Because you're pathetic. You're a desperate woman who was so hungry to be a mother that you adopted a child without doing any real research into her past. I trusted the social workers. You trusted because you wanted to trust. Because it was easier to believe a pretty lie than to investigate the ugly truth. Clara, do you know how easy it was to manipulate you? From the first day I came to your house, I knew exactly what kind of woman you were. Lonely, needy, desperate for love. All I had to do was act like the damaged child who needed healing. And you gave me everything I wanted: protection, money, a perfect alibi. Who is going to suspect that a woman adopted by a respectable accountant is a killer? So you never felt anything for me. I felt gratitude for your usefulness. I felt satisfaction at how easy it was to control you. But love? No, Mom. Psychopaths don't love. So you admit you're a psychopath. I admit I'm superior. I admit I'm smarter than normal people like you. Superior for killing innocent people. Superior for doing what is necessary to get what I want. And what did you want from me? Your money, obviously, but I also wanted to see how long I could keep up the deception. It became an interesting game. A psychological experiment. How long can I make an intelligent woman believe I am her loving daughter while I plan to kill her? And the answer, years. You're stupider than I thought. At that moment, I finally understood completely who Clara really was. She was not my daughter. She had never been my daughter. She was a predator who had used my maternal love as a weapon against me for 3 decades. You know what, Clara? What? Thank you. Thank you for what? For finally showing me your true face. For years, I blamed myself for not being a good enough mother for you. Now, I know the problem was never me. The problem is still you, Mom. The problem is that you are weak. No, Clara, the problem is you. You are a monster who feeds on the goodness of other people. I stood up to leave. Mom, wait. What? I still need you. For what? To testify at my trial. To tell the judge that I had a difficult childhood, that I deserve compassion. No, I am going to testify at your trial, Clara. But I'm going to testify about what you really are. Her face contorted with pure rage. If you do that, you'll regret it. Are you threatening me? I am promising you that I will find a way to hurt you, even from jail. Clara, for years, I was afraid of disappointing you. Now, you should be afraid of me. I left the jail feeling as if a year weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Months later, Clara's trial began in the county courthouse. As I had promised, I testified against her, telling exactly what I had discovered about her crimes and her true nature. The prosecutor had overwhelming evidence: Clara's detailed diaries, the cyanide found in her house, testimonies from Mark, and forensic evidence from the murders of her two husbands. Clara had hired the best defense attorney in the state, paid for with the money she had stolen from her victims' inheritances. Her defense strategy was predictable, pleading temporary insanity caused by childhood trauma. But Clara's diaries told a different story. Page after page of meticulous planning, precise financial calculations, and detailed documentation of each murder. There was no evidence of insanity, only evidence of a cold and calculating mind. The turning point came when Mark testified. Still weak from the poisoning, he recounted how Clara had threatened to kill me if he tried to escape or seek help. She told me she had perfected murder methods that could not be detected by routine autopsies. She told me she had killed before and that she would kill again. She kept photos of her victims. Yes, as trophies. When it was my turn to testify, I told the whole truth. For years, I thought I was her adoptive mother. Now I know I was her victim. Clara manipulated me from the first day she came to my house. She studied me, learned my weaknesses, and exploited my love to get money, protection, and cover for her crimes. Did she ever express remorse? Never. Do you believe she is capable of rehabilitation? No. Clara is a predator who sees people as objects. Counselor, I found diaries written in your client's own hand, documenting exactly how she murdered 8 people. There is no possible misinterpretation. The trial lasted weeks. The jury deliberated for less than hours, guilty of first-degree murder on all counts. Alina showed no emotion when the verdict was read. She looked directly at me as the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And I could see in her eyes the same coldness I had seen during our last conversation in jail. After the trial, Andrew and I sat on the courthouse steps, processing the end of this nightmare. "How do you feel?" he asked me. "Liberated," I replied honestly. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Do you regret adopting her?" "I regret not having seen the warning signs earlier, but I don't regret trying to save a child who I thought needed love. I'm going to live my life for the first time in years. I'm going to do the things I want to do, not the things I do to please or protect a predator." And us? Are we still family? Andrew had been the only genuine victim in this whole situation besides me. He had risked his life to protect me from Alina. We are the only real family we've had for years. That night, I returned to my house and burned all the photographs, gifts, and memories of Alina, not out of anger, but but out of liberation. It was time to close the most painful chapter of my life and begin a new one. Years after the trial, I was sitting in the yard of my new house in Asheville, North Carolina, watching Andrew play with his 2 adopted children. I had made the decision to move out of the city where I had spent years living a lie. And Andrew had decided to move with me after we became something more than survivors. We became chosen family. The house in Asheville was exactly the opposite of the life I had had with Alina. Open, full of light, honest. Andrew had adopted 2 siblings, Lucas, aged 7, and Emily, aged 5, whose mother had died in an accident and who had no extended family. After everything we had been through, we both understood the value of creating a family based on genuine love rather than obligation or manipulation. Grandma Margaret, can you tell us a story? Emily asked me that afternoon, snuggling into my lap after we finished eating mashed potatoes and turkey. Of course, my love. What kind of story do you want? A story about a bad witch who turns good. Lucas, who was more serious than his little sister, chimed in, Anne, bad witches don't turn good. That's why they're bad. It was a distinction I had learned painfully over the past few years. Some people are fundamentally destructive, and no amount of love or patience can change that. Lucas is right, I told Emily gently, but I can tell you a story about a woman who learned to protect herself from bad witches. As I told them a very edited version of my own story, I thought about how my life had changed since Alina's trial. First, I had sold everything that connected me to my previous life. The house where I had raised Alina, the furniture I had bought thinking of creating a family home, even my accounting business that I had built for decades. I had started completely from scratch at years old. Second, I had established a foundation that helped identify and support victims of family manipulation. I worked with psychologists and social workers to train adoptive families on warning signs of personality disorders in children. My goal was to ensure that no other person spent years without realizing they were raising a predator. Third, I had learned to trust my instinct. For years with Alina, I had ignored warning signs because I wanted to believe in the idealized version of motherhood I had created in my mind. Now, when something felt wrong, I investigated instead of rationalizing. Grandma, did the bad witch in your story go to jail forever? Lucas asked. Yes, my love, forever. And she can never get out. Never. But what if she says she's sorry? It was a perceptive question from a 7-year-old. Lucas, some people say they're sorry, but they don't really mean it. They only say it to get what they want. How can you tell the difference? You watch their actions. You don't just listen to their words. If someone is truly sorry, they change their behavior. If they are just pretending, they keep doing the same bad things. Andrew walked over to us after finishing the dishes, telling which stories again. The children want to understand why some people are bad, I replied. It's an important question, Andrew said, sitting down next to us in the yard. You know what? I think the most important part of any story about bad witches is to remember that good people can always find ways to protect themselves, like you protected yourselves from the bad witch. Emily asked. Exactly like us, I confirmed. By being brave, by telling each other the truth, and by looking out for each other. That night after putting the children to bed, Andrew and I sat on the deck watching the stars. Do you ever think about her? He asked me. Alina, sometimes, but no longer with pain. With what? With relief that she's where she can't hurt anyone else. Do you think she will ever truly regret what she did? No. The psychologists who evaluated her said she is incapable of genuine remorse. For her victims were not real people. They were obstacles or tools. Do you regret adopting? It was a question Andrew had asked me several times over the years. I regret adopting without investigating enough, but I don't regret having wanted to be a mother. And I definitely don't regret adopting Lucas and Emily with you. What's the difference? The difference is that Lucas and Emily are children who need love and security. Alina was a predator who needed victims. How do we know they aren't like her? Because we've been watching carefully for years. We see genuine empathy. We see real remorse. We see the capacity to form authentic emotional bonds. And if we see warning signs, we will confront them immediately instead of rationalizing them. I received a letter from Alina last week. It was the first communication I had received from her in years. The letter was typically manipulative. She apologized for past misunderstandings and said she had found religion in jail. She wanted me to visit her so we could heal our relationship. I threw the letter away without finishing it. I had learned that some relationships don't need healing. They need complete termination. Instead, I use my energy to build real relationships with people capable of genuine love. Andrew, Lucas, Emily, my friends in Asheville, the families I work with through my foundation. At years old, I finally understand what it means to have a real family. It's not perfect. It's not without conflict, but it's honest. That night, as I prepared for sleep, I thought about the difference between forgiveness and liberation. I did not forgive Alina because forgiveness implies a relationship, and we no longer have one. Instead, I liberated myself from her, from the guilt, from the hope that she would change, from the need to understand why she was the way she was. Alina was a predator who had used my love as a weapon against me for years. Now, she was a predator in a cage where she could hurt no one else. And I was finally free to be the mother, grandmother, and woman I had always wanted to be.